Hello and welcome to this episode of WeRise with Aaliyah, the podcast where we awaken our power, reclaim our voices, and rise together as Muslim women. So today's episode is a big one, and I know that the F word really triggers some people. Feminism. There is this idea that's really prevalent in the Muslim community that feminism is fundamentally against Islam. Like it's not compatible with Islam and that it has no place in our lives as Muslim women. So I believe that this is incorrect. And today, what I'm going to try and do is debunk some of the myths about feminism, because I think that a lot of the reasons why people have got an issue with being called a feminist, or have got an issue with the idea that you can even be a Muslim and a feminist at the same time, is because they don't really understand what feminism is. Okay, so that's not to say that I don't understand what it feels like to be unsure about whether you're a feminist or not. Like, I get that because I had that same battle raging inside me internally for a really long time. So even though I self-identified privately as a feminist, I spent a lot of time thinking that it wasn't safe for me to actually publicly call myself that. And I had a lot of Instagram bio angst, like, oh, shall I put that I'm a feminist in my social media bios, because it's going to turn a lot of people off and people are going to have like this idea about me which is incorrect. And it took me a long time to just really own that title, and now I do. But now what I really want to do, especially in this video, is just to help other people clarify what is feminism, what isn't feminism. So hopefully that we can make our peace a little bit with that title. Or if you think it's not for you, you don't have to call yourself a feminist, because that's what feminism is all about, right? It's about choice. It's about giving women choice. Call yourself a feminist, don't call yourself a feminist. It's fine, it's cool. So anyway, right, this is what happens when a woman, especially a Muslim woman, decides to call herself a feminist, right? So even for women that are doing women's rights work, campaigning against violence against women, talking about women's empowerment and education, that's all well and good, right? But the second we self-identify publicly as a feminist, yeah, we are just labeled with all sorts of things. People think we aren't spiritual, or that we hate men, or we want to dominate them, that feminists are against tradition and motherhood and marriage, or, the worst one I think is when they think that we're the same as these white liberal feminists who want to, save Muslim women by bombing their countries into oblivion, like in Afghanistan and Iraq, and now like absolutely devastatingly in Iran as well. And that's absolutely not my feminism. Just like my Islam is not the same Islam as Al Qaeda or the Taliban or whatever, that feminism is not my feminism. So there are a whole lot of myths and misconceptions that we need to debunk. And the reason why I think it's actually important, like, why do I even care? Like, why do I even care if people don't like feminism? Well, it's a very important concept, and it's a movement at its most basic for women's rights and equality. And we would be absolutely lost without it. And we owe a lot to it, and we still need it. So I think it's really important for us as Muslim women to grapple with this thorny issue so that we can, as I said, make our peace with feminism and hear its message and see it for the truly empowering movement that it is for all women, including Muslim women. So the first and most common misconception that I hear is that feminism is incompatible with Islam, that it is contrary to Islamic principles, and in particular that it is contrary to Islamic principles on gender relations. But here's the thing, I say that if you believe that feminism and Islam are incompatible, then it's because you have misconceptions about feminism, or you have a narrow understanding of Islam, or probably both. So I think that once we go through these misconceptions about what feminism actually is and what it isn't, we will see that feminism does not contradict Islam at all. But of course, it also depends on what you think Islam is, right? And what do you believe are the Islamic principles of gender relations? So where do we stand on that? And can we even agree on what Islam says about relations between men and women? So look at the Taliban. I know there are other groups, but let's just take them as an example because it's just like the most obvious one, right? So obviously they would be against feminism because their version of Islam is highly misogynistic. So of course they would say that feminism contradicts Islamic principles because they have interpreted Islam to fit their incredibly patriarchal, anti-woman ideology. So whether or not you believe that feminism is compatible with Islam also really, really depends on how you interpret and practice Islam yourself. So now let's talk a little bit about what I believe are the Islamic principles of gender relations. And I say that I believe because, as I said, there are many ways to interpret Islam and to practice it. And, Islam is a broad sea. There's room for us all. There are over 1 billion Muslims on the planet. We are not all going to believe the same thing, and that's okay, right? This is what I believe and what I take from the Quran and what many other Muslim women, yes, including Muslim feminists and Islamic feminists and female Islamic scholars, and I should say male scholars as well, right? This is not just a feminist approach, and anyone can come to this conclusion. All you have to do is read the Quran yourself. If you do a thematic reading of the Quran, so that's when you look at all the verses of the Quran that are on the same subject together, rather than looking at individual verses in isolation to extract their meaning in that very particular verse, right? But you're actually looking at it all together, then what you will see is very clearly that certain themes emerge, and then we can draw certain principles from them. Right? So if you do a thematic reading of gender relations in the Quran, so then you'll see that relations between men and women in society and in marriage are based on mutuality, dignity, spiritual equality, affection and love, muwadda, compassion, rahmah, adl, justice, and ihsan, excellence. This is my favorite, ihsan. So ihsan is about always seeking what is best and for the highest good of all. So it's not just about fulfilling your most basic duties and go, oh, yeah, I've like ticked the boxes, I've done everything I need to, or I haven't committed any sin, or I'm good. No, this is about going above and beyond for another. So according to these themes, relations are not based on hierarchy, like male authority, men being the heads, women being underneath them, right? This is not based on male domination, despite, of course, what some or most traditional scholars will tell you. But if you read the Quran for yourself, you will find these themes very clearly, right? So feminism is only a problem or seen as contradictory to Islam for those people who take something very different from the Quran, like, who read the Quran and find all this beauty and love and reciprocity between men and women. And then and of course, the example of our Prophet and his own marriages, but they choose to see something else and say that is Islam. These are Islamic principles. They see hierarchy and male domination and authority and control of women. And they say, oh, this is Islam. Well, no, it's not. That's your patriarchal interpretation, which is actually an oppressive one, which, of course, we know is, in fact, against the core principles of Islam. Justice, right? What is contradictory to Islamic principles is oppression. And feminism is against oppression and injustice, just like Islam. So actually, Islam and feminism are very aligned and only problematic if you have a patriarchal approach to Islam in the first place. So I hope that makes sense. Okay, so now that we understand very, very briefly, in a nutshell, what are the Islamic principles of gender relations? We can now talk about what feminism is, or more specifically, is not. So these misconceptions really discourage Muslim women from identifying with it. So I'm now going to debunk some of the key ones now. First one, feminism is a Western intervention and a colonial imposition. So there is a really common belief amongst Muslims that feminism was invented in the West. It's a Western ideology, and it has been used as a weapon against Muslim countries. And therefore, in order to resist colonialism and imperial aggression, we also need to resist feminism, which is a Western export that has an agenda which is to undermine the indigenous local culture, traditions, the very fabric of their society. Now, one thing that I will say is absolutely 100% that Western countries, European imperialists, have appropriated feminism. They have. And it has been a tool and a weapon in the arsenal of colonialism. And we see this, unfortunately, even today, where we see countries like the USA bombing Iran in order to liberate the women. So yeah, absolutely. So you can see how, because feminism has been linked to colonial expansion and imperial aggression very directly and closely by the aggressors themselves, you can understand why so many people push back against feminism, because you can see how wrongly it has been appropriated. But the thing is that women's empowerment itself is not a Western concept, right? Feminism is about justice, and justice is literally our birthright. Wanting to live a life free from violence and oppression is a human instinct, and that desire is an innately human one, and it's not specific to any culture or nation or ideology. It is our birthright, and Muslim women have been advocating for their rights and their freedom for decades and centuries. It's not something that was invented by the West or only came to Muslim lands through Western imperialism. No, Muslim women have been saying for a long time that we want to live with dignity, we want to live with justice, we want to have choice in our lives, we want fair treatment, right? So by kind of equating feminism, or let's call it women's rights activism, right, if you feel more comfortable with that, then you are kind of discounting the work of our mothers and grandmothers and foremothers, who have been leading this charge for a really, really long time. And it had nothing to do with the imperialists. And you only have to look through our literature and our poetry to find examples of women speaking out about the issues that they faced in their families and what it was like being a woman, and how they wanted a better life for themselves and for their daughters, and how they knew that the reason for their suffering was their gender. Muslim women around the world have been leading feminist movements, right, from within their faith. Nothing to do with the West. For example, they have been questioning the interpretations of their sacred texts, right? They have been challenging unjust laws around marriage, divorce, male guardianship. They've been writing books and forming collectives and leading protests in Pakistan and in Bangladesh and in Iran, right? They have been standing up to oppression and injustice, not against Islam or, despite their Islam, but because of it, because Islam tells us to do that very thing. It tells us to stand up to our oppressors, even if they are our own kin, right? And you know what? Here, I just have to add that it's really so disingenuous of all these so-called activists, especially Muslim men, protesting racism and Islamophobia and imperial aggression, etc. But they stay completely silent when it comes to women's rights, especially Muslim women's rights. Not a peep when, women are being murdered because of domestic abuse or sexual violence and rape, because somehow they think that speaking about women's rights to live a life free from violence is somehow a colonial and imperial agenda to undermine our culture and our way of life. Please, someone make it make sense. That really annoys me. And I feel like it is a deliberate ploy to shut down women who want to draw attention to issues that we face in our communities and in our nations. They just say, oh, you're just a liberal Western feminist. You're a mouthpiece for Western imperialism. You're a sellout to your nation or your culture or your tradition. Well, this is not about imitating the West. It's about demanding basic human rights, equality, respect, freedom. The things that our religion actually gives to us, but that the patriarchy took away. So the idea that feminism is like foreign itself is a colonial legacy. And yes, let's be real, colonial powers 100% used women's rights as a justification to invade and occupy and dominate Muslim lands. And they're still doing it now. Right, we can see that clear as day. And they've done this by, painting Muslim men as like barbaric and uncivilized, misogynistic, etc. And, Muslim women as all just universally oppressed and needing to be rescued by their Western saviors. Well, no thanks. But as a response, what's happened is that Muslim societies have overcorrected. So rejecting even genuine calls for reform and women's rights for fear of being seen as pandering to the West. But the thing is that rejecting feminism or women's rights does not decolonize us. What will decolonize us is if we can reclaim those values, those Islamic values of justice and equality from within our own spiritual and cultural and intellectual frameworks. So by taking a uniquely Muslim or Islamic approach to feminism, we are actually performing a type of anti-colonial or decolonial resistance. And I could probably do a whole other video on this. So this actually brings me to my second misconception about feminism, and that is that there is only one type of feminism, i.e. white liberal feminism. So I've already talked a little bit about the problems with white liberal feminism. And yes, some forms of feminism like that have tried to have been appropriated ways that actually really, really harm Muslim women and Muslims everywhere and indigenous people everywhere. They've also try to universalize their experience and project it onto everyone else. So basically, when they're talking about women's problems, really they're just talking about white women's problems, and they're not even listening to us at all. And this is something that has been recognized widely in the sort of third wave of feminism, where in post-colonial feminists from the subcontinent, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, spoke out massively about this, saying, hey, your feminism is not our feminism. Your issues are not our issues. When you're speaking about women, you're not really including us in the conversation. You don't even understand us. You don't even respect our culture, our traditions. You think we're all oppressed and, that we've got no choices and that our religion is inherently subjugating us. And you subscribe to the idea that if we really want to liberate ourselves and if we want to call ourselves true feminists, then actually we need to throw off our hijabs and our traditional ways of life and then just basically become white, modern, Western women, and then we'll be real feminists. Muslim feminists, or I should say Islamic feminists, reject that completely, as do post-colonial feminists, as do intersectional feminists, as do feminisms from various indigenous cultures. So we know that this white liberal feminism, which is what most people think of, unfortunately, when they think of what feminism is, they think of white liberal feminists. And that kind of feminism completely ignores race, class, colonialism, spirituality, all of that. And we don't need that kind of feminism. We don't subscribe to that kind of feminism, especially when that feminism justifies imperial aggression, which we know certain feminists do. And that is, in my opinion, well, you're not even a real feminist. You're not the real feminists if you do that. Okay. So what I just want to make really clear is that while that might have originally been what feminism was, like I'm talking back in the 60s, it has evolved a lot, and there have been waves of feminism, and I can do another video on that specifically to show the different waves of feminism that happened. So we had post-colonial feminism. We're now in the fourth wave of feminism, which is intersectional, and we take into account the intersecting identities and experiences of women from all sorts of different backgrounds. And actually, this is how we reclaim feminism, and we redefine it for ourselves, right? On our terms, not on what white Western liberal feminists decide for us. Absolutely not. So that one, I hope people can just let go of this idea and actually see feminism as having potential to really allow us to dig deep into our roots and our identity and advocate for the things that really matter to us. So for Muslim women, a lot of it is seeing how our legal traditions have evolved and whether they are fair to Muslim women, and actually looking at the lived realities of Muslim women, whether that's in Muslim majority countries or whether that's those of us living in the West, what is important to us now and for the next generation of women and girls coming up. And we can define our own agenda. So it's really not about imitating the West or fitting into their agenda at all, because we know they're not here for us at all. We know they're not here for us, right? They're the ones that will be sort of saying, ban the burqa, or, no hijabs in schools and all of this, right? That's not our feminism. We don't want that. Thank you very much. You can keep it, right? The next misconception about feminism that I want to debunk is that, and this one, I swear, when I hear this, Muslim women don't need feminism because Islam gives women all their rights. Who's heard that one before? Well, let's break this down. I mean, I'm not going to go massively into it because I think it's really obvious, quite honestly, that is a complete load of BS. And the reason why I'm saying it is BS is because men use that argument to shut women down, to stop us from highlighting injustices, gender-based violence, and all the rest of it. Basically, it's a form of gaslighting. It's like saying, what are you complaining about? If you're Muslim, you're in the best religion. Like, you've got everything. God's given you all their rights and all your rights. And to that, I want to say, yes. God gave us rights and you bloody men took them away. That's actually what happened. All you have to do is look around the world. And I don't mean just Muslim countries. I mean everywhere, right? As Shahnaz Haqqani, who's our wonderful teacher in the Rising Sisterhood, where we have a monthly Islamic feminist masterclass, which if you want to join, I will put the details below. In that, she said, patriarchy does not have a religion. And this is so important to understand. Patriarchy exists outside of religion, whether that's Islam, Christianity, Hinduism, whatever, right? Patriarchy just exists. It's literally the world we live in. It's everywhere. It's in every culture around the world, pretty much, in a different form or, using different methods. But ultimately, you will not find many societies or communities or cultures in the world where women and men are actually genuinely reciprocal and equal, and women have the same opportunities. No. And that's because of patriarchy. So we need feminism to fight patriarchy. We don't need feminism to fight Islam, right? So when people say that Islam gives women all their rights, all you have to do is look around at Muslim countries and say, okay, well, if Islam gives women all their rights, why are Muslims not giving women all their rights? And if they aren't, then we need feminism, because feminism literally does that. It is a movement to improve women's lives by giving them greater equality, by giving them their rights. That's really, in a nutshell, what feminism is. It's just a movement to create a more fair and just and equal society between men and women. And where you have extremely high rates of female illiteracy or violence against women and girls, that means that is not an equal society. And yeah, we don't live in any, I live in the UK, and this is not an equal society. So we need feminism, right? Because until countries are actually giving women all their rights and allowing them to live lives of dignity and respect and justice and equality, then we will need feminism. So before you shut down women and saying, oh, Islam gives women all their rights, it's not about whether an ideology in theory gives women their rights. You can't, an idea or a theory cannot give a woman their rights. She has to actually receive those rights in reality. If she's not receiving those rights in reality, then she must fight for them. It's really quite simple, and I genuinely get confused when people use this argument and think we can't see through it. It's like, yeah, dude, like, no. Anyway, so the next myth that I want to debunk is that feminism means that women want to dominate men. Now, I've heard this one a lot as well, and this is usually from really angry men, often young men, who feel like they are the victims of this new society where women are rising up and basically overthrowing men from their positions of privilege and power, and now they are in charge and poor men are being trodden all over. That was the plan of feminism all along. And I want to say that absolutely is not the case. And I don't really want to get into like the whole incel culture right now and red pill and all of that. But what I will say is that feminists want equality. They don't want to dominate men. They want to be treated fairly. That's it. So patriarchy is all about hierarchy, literally the rule of men, right? So men are seen as the head of the household. Men are normally the leaders of governments and institutions and everything. You know, we say it's a man's world. It's a world that was created by men for men, really. So men hold the most power, the most wealth, and the most privilege that comes with that. Feminists don't want to invert that. They don't want to sort of turn society on its head and women will then be at the top and men will be ruled by women. No, it's actually getting rid of hierarchy altogether. So a matriarchal society, which is the opposite of patriarchal, actually doesn't mean that women are in charge. It means that we are all collectively holding and sharing power, and that sort of linear direction of power is replaced by a circular one. It's more about the collective, about the community, about reciprocity, about caring for the earth and the children and really caring for each other, not dominating. It's not about domination and control, which is what patriarchy is, and where we get capitalism and consumerism and destruction of the earth for our own selfish gains. This is why you see war and poverty and hate of the other. right? It's coming from this need to dominate. And feminists say that has come from patriarchy, because the world is out of balance when the masculine and the feminine, or men and women, are not in balance with each other. Then certain masculine traits of, power, control, aggression, dominance have just been allowed to run rampant and basically destroyed the world. So actually, feminism is not about wanting to dominate men. It's not about wanting to dominate anyone. It's about coming back to wholeness and balance. Okay, so I realized that I've been talking for like an hour, like 45 minutes, and I realized that I've been talking for like 40 minutes and I've only got through half my list. So I think what I'll do is I'll do another video on the other 5. So today we have covered 5 key misconceptions about feminism and cleared up, hopefully, some of those issues. But if you still have any questions about them, I would really love to hear what you think. And remember, this is a conversation. So sometimes when we listen to new ideas, it might actually raise more questions for us, which is a really good thing. It's not a bad thing to question. Yeah, it's a great thing. It means that your mind is expanding, you're learning, you're curious. Being confused is not a bad thing when you are on this journey of growth and reflection and self-development. So if you do have any questions, please ask in the comments. I also invite you to learn more about Islamic feminism. As I mentioned earlier, we have a monthly Islamic feminist masterclass in our membership, which is called the Rising Sisterhood, because we are new and we want to grow and hear what you want from us. So for that reason, there is a really amazing introductory price of £15 a month. And with that, you get 5 live classes, including one from the amazing Dr. Shanaz Haqqani, who is a professor of gender in Islam and sexuality and all things religion and gender. And she has also got a YouTube channel, which I'm going to link below, called What the Patriarchy. You can learn loads from her there as well. But if you want to join community of like-minded Muslim women who are all on this path of growth and healing, then I would say please check it out. I would also really appreciate it if you could like and share and of course subscribe, because this is a new channel and we want this message to reach as many Muslim women as possible. So if you think of a woman, a sister, a friend, someone who you think could benefit from hearing this, I would just share. And of course, in the next video, I will go through the other 5 misconceptions about feminism. I hope you found this helpful, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. Until then, keep rising. Lots of love. Bye.